Is Kamaru Usman the most dangerous man in the UFC? Kamaru Usman is not called the Nigerian Nightmare for no reason. When you get into the cage with him, that is exactly what he is. A hellish dream that you can only hope to wake up from. Usman, of course, is arguably the best fighter on the UFC roster. His status as the top pound-for-pound fighter supports that claim. But is he also the most dangerous man in the UFC? Before we get into that, let's assess how Usman found his way to the top of the food chain. Usman has been regarded as being a very promising prospect since winning Season 21 of The Ultimate Fighter, but no one really understood how special he is until he got to prove it under the brightest spotlights. Coming in as a replacement for Colby Covington at UFC 235, Usman was pegged as a slight underdog against then-champion Tyron Woodley. But come fight night, Usman rose to the occasion and gave Woodley the beating of a lifetime. The fight was so lopsided that it produced possibly one of the single worst performances by a defending champion in the history of the sport. 5 rounds of wire-to-wire domination, and Usman's reign of terror had just begun. What sets Usman apart from his peers and fellow champions is his brilliance in all facets of cage fighting. Primarily a vaulted wrestler, Usman proved his bread and butter was all he needed to get to the mountaintop and stay there. But Usman is not one to rest on his laurels. Just like John Jones before him, Usman has given us enough evidence to conclude that he's not afraid to step out of his comfort zone and beat his opponents at their own games. In his first title defense, Usman engaged in an all-out brawl against Covington and used his stand-up to protect his throne. Sure, it can be argued that Usman was forced to take that route as Covington is an equally decorated wrestler. But in follow-up fights, Usman has proved that his striking showcase is not just a one-time deal. Needless to say, competing against Usman is a tall order for anyone, but fighting him went from exceedingly difficult to downright daunting once he linked up with the MMA coach extraordinaire Trevor Wittman. Known for having a great mind when it comes to striking and his meticulous attention to detail, Wittman is a coaching savant to say the least. Adding his guidance to Usman's talent and his physical attributes, the rest of the UFC's welterweight division is absolutely screwed. Under the striking coach's tutelage, Usman has unlocked a new dimension of his arsenal. The Usmans Evolution was best displayed during his most recent outing with Jorge Masvidal. Having seen the matchup before, fans and analysts expected Usman to put the game bread on his back for 5 rounds en route to a victory. But again, we've come to learn that Kamaru is full of surprises. Come fight night, Kamaru engaged in a firefight with one of the most feared strikers in all of the UFC, and he emerged the victor. That would be like if Khabib decided to strike Conor McGregor and won via knockout. But before we can proclaim Kamaru as the most dangerous fighter in all of the UFC, we have to assess him in relation to his fellow champions. Of course, Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko have wiped out their entire divisions and have claims to being the most dominant champions as well. But when the level of competition is taken into consideration, Kamaru's challengers are significantly more talented. Then there is Francis Ngannou, Israel Adesanya. While both are dominant strikers in their own right, these champions have encountered problems against high-level wrestlers. Again, the scariest thing about fighting Usman is that he can win wherever the fight takes place. Woodley wanted to grapple him, no problem. Masvidal wanted to strike with him. We know how that story ended. Circling back to the question, it's not rocket science to assume that Kamaru is indeed the most dangerous man in the UFC, and probably in MMA in general. Chael Sonnen once said that what separates good champions from great ones is that a good champ defeated all of his challengers, while a great champ beat them all and beat them again. That's precisely what Usman is doing right now, Fresh off his rematch win over Masvidal, the king of 185 is gearing up for round 2 against Colby Covington. Presently, it's too early to proclaim that Kamaru Usman is the best UFC welterweight in history. With respect to his accomplishments, that distinction still belongs to GSP George St. Pierre. However, surpassing GSP is not out of the equation right now. A few more title defenses under his belt will definitely solidify his claim to that status. But for now, Kamaru Usman has to focus on the task at hand, and that of course is another go-around with Covington in the main event of UFC 268. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Sportskeeda MMA.